In the last lecture, we saw ngIf, super useful directive, and ngIf was a structural directive. The other type of directives are attribute directives, which are called like this because they really just look like normal HTML attributes without a star basically. Let's add one. On the server component here, we output the server status, right? And the server status always is offline. Let's mix this up. Let's say we want to dynamically create this. So I'll add the constructor, which is just a built-in method each TypeScript class has, which is called once this component is created. And here I will set the server status to a random value. I will use the math random function, and this gives us a random number between 0 and 1, a floating point number. And if this is greater than 0.5, I want to set the status to online, otherwise I will set it to offline. So with that, we shouldn't get the same status all the time. And now, let's check this. We see indeed online and offline. That's lucky. Could have, of course, also been both offline since we have a 50% chance. Now we have two different statuses here. And now let's say we want to change the color of the background color of this component depending on the server status. For this, we can use another directive. On this wrapping paragraph here, I can add it, and it's called ngStyle. Now that's a built-in directive. You can recognize this on the ng at the beginning. And ngStyle, that's the directive, is pretty useless like this. We need to give it some configuration to do something. That is why we will use property binding on this directive. And it's super important to understand that these squared brackets here are not part of the directive name. The directive name is just ngStyle. The squared brackets indicate that we want to bind to some property on this directive, and this property name happens to also be ngStyle. We will see this in practice on our own directives in the directives section later. But super important to understand that property binding is not the same as a directive. It's totally different. We are binding to a property of the directive. This ngStyle property expects to get a JavaScript object. And here we define key value pairs of the style name as the key and the value of the style as the value. So for example, we could bind background color, and if you want to use this notation with the dash, you have to wrap it in single quotation marks to make it a valid JavaScript property name. Or you use the camel case notation background color like this. And then you could set this to red. But I don't want to set it to red, I want to set it to something depending on the server status. So here we could simply call a method getColor. So that is really mixing now all the things and make it clear that between the quotation marks we are executing TypeScript code here. So therefore we can of course call a method. Now getColor is a method we can add here. And getColor should now, let's say, return green if the status is online and red otherwise. So I will return something. First I check the server status, so this server status, and if this is equal to online, using a ternary expression here, I will return green, otherwise I will return red. So getColor will return green or red, and this is then assigned as the background color with ngStyle. If we now save this, let's have a look at the result. We see indeed the running server has a green background and the offline server has a red one. So that is working. ngStyle allows us to dynamically update that. If I reload, you see now both are offline, so both are red now. And that is the big advantage of ngStyle. It allows you to dynamically update the styles. And of course, if the server status here did change over time, it would update the styling respectively. So this binding we set up here still is working. If the server status here, which is responsible for choosing the right color, changes, it updates the style. So that's ngStyle, an attribute directive added like an attribute, and in this case also using property binding to configure it.